very open from the very beginning. I was introduced initially to NuCalm by my colleague, Dr. Ed Gilbert, a radiation oncologist out of Dallas who ran 2 large cancer centers there. And he and I were partnering on a comprehensive cancer wellness program in West Palm Beach at Hippocrates Health Institute. And so Ed was the one who arranged with Jim to come and bring the NuCalm system to our cancer program to do a pilot research study. So for the last 18 months, we've been doing ongoing research utilizing the NuCalm system with the heart rate variability to look at pre and post testing and the differences in the results in strengthening the parasympathetic nervous system. We're looking for changes after 8 to 15 sessions with people that have a diagnosis of cancer to look at what effect the NuCalm neurofeedback technology actually has on their autonomic nervous system, because we know that stress is a major component both in before the diagnosis of cancer and for sure secondary to the diagnosis of cancer. So in my way of thinking and in the research I've done over the last 30 years in the field of psychoneuroimmunology and cancer, I've seen that the more we can intervene and help people downregulate their stress physiology, we can have a really good chance of helping them upregulate their immune system and all of the other healing mechanisms in the body as well. In addition to what we've done, there are thousands of research articles at this point that can be referenced, pointing to the major component that stress has not only with cancer, but with many other illnesses. Illness exists within a human being, and so a human being, depending upon their state of well-being, including the state of health of their autonomic nervous system, is either more prone to disease or to symptomatology or is in a more optimal state. And we all know, I think, probably that when we're going through a lot of stress, that we're more vulnerable to getting sick, even if it's with a common cold or a flu. Last year, I think Stanford came out with statistics that 90% of all illnesses have a major stress component. For sure, stress has an impact and a negative effect on one's health with looking at cancer, heart disease, diabetes, any of the autoimmune disorders. I would really go on to even say even the dermatological spectrum of disorders, because we're very sensitive to the physiological effects of stress. I mean, even if we look at asthma, we know that when kids get more stressed out, they're more apt to have an asthmatic attack. My experience with NuCalm has been personally, and I've used it over the last year and a half at different times and in different varying amounts given the situation. But I would say on average, I would use it, let's say, a dozen times a month. I have found my experience to been personally both that I have found that there's something that happens going into that deep state of relaxation that's different than getting myself into a relaxed meditative state consciously on my own. What I can translate that into is that with the binaural beat and going into alpha within the first 4 minutes, there's something about the old limbic brain that gets put to rest, gets put into a state of comfort and well-being, meaning that there is not a perceived danger. There is a calming of the whole nervous system. And I find that really fascinating because in what we do in psychoneuroimmunology and cancer, we focused a lot on the cognitive behavioral interventions, helping people think healthier, to have healthier emotional responses, to give healthier, richer, more meaningful meanings, if you will, to the things in their lives so that they're not upsetting themselves in the ways that they could have previously. What I found with cancer is that when people go on this, surprisingly, it's more than just a meditated, deep, relaxed state. What we found, though, is that all of a sudden there will be emotional memories, very raw in nature, that come up out of just what seems to be nowhere, and yet very important resolution that seems to occur. And so we'll see people beginning to cry, and then they'll calm. They're still on the NuCalm treatment, what's happening neurophysiologically, perhaps, that's been sort of disconnected in the brain somehow or trapped, starts to begin to get resolution. And interestingly enough, what can seem like a very raw and challenging experience gets released. It's almost like a PTSD sort of flooding memory, and yet it's released and does not seem to recur repeatedly, that same memory with the attached raw emotion. So something happens in the clearance of that. I absolutely don't see any negative implications with using NuCalm. I would say that sometimes when people start to have emotion that comes up, there can be potential resistance to that. And yet, if they can stick with it and understand the value of it and the clearance of it that happens pretty profoundly and quickly, and that they get that that actually is a strong healing mechanism that's occurring, I've seen that that information can then allow them to stick with it and they go, no.